Hi there, welcome to this brief session. I intend to keep it within an hour, and I want to assure you this is one of the most valuable use of your time. This 1 hour is going to save you several hours of stress, several hours of and help you translate it into several hours of productivity. So we're not going to waste much time. We'll go straight to the point. 18 proactive questions every survey data professional should ask to minimize stress and optimize productivity. I believe you are here on this page probably because you have managed some survey data before as a field manager, as a data manager, or data programmer. But if you have had stress managing surveys, especially the data aspects, please, this is very important for you to listen to. I will try to keep it within 1 hour. So let's go on straight to the point. Managing surveys can be very, very stressful, and maybe some of us can relate to the stress of keeping to deadlines, the stress of managing stakeholders, managing subordinates, managing the donor, managing various kinds of people, managing the trainers, managing the enumerators. It could be stressful. Keeping to the budget too can be stressful. Something goes wrong and you still have to keep within the budget of what you have already promised. And then the fluid strategy, things keep changing. Maybe the donor says this is not the right question, we need to change the question, or let's add this objective, or let's reduce this or expand that. That in itself can be a source of stress. And then we have loose cannons, things that just go wrong, and then how you have to go about doing damage control. Like any other project in the world, all these things happen. And then, of course, we have the sleepless nights. I don't know if you can relate to waking up with red, swollen eyes, and you still have to get up and get going. This happens a lot in surveys. So the question in your fantasy mind always is it really possible to do more with less? Can we have more productivity with less stress? You understand? And I think sometimes you think this is fantasy, this is going to be the real world. Just keep on being stressful. And that is why I did this session, so that we can look at places where we can minimize the stress and increase the productivity. That's the whole reason for this. Now, why are we asking 18 questions? Why 18 questions? Because, like Albert Einstein said, if he had a problem and his life depended on it, because I think you don't want to be stressful in the year 2020. You don't want to be stressful spending so much time like I did. There were years I spent Christmas working on data, New Year working on data, just because I needed to keep to the deadlines. But if I had asked the right questions, I am very, very sure it shouldn't have been that stressful. And that's why Albert Einstein said I'll use the first 55 minutes to determine the proper questions to ask. And that's why I believe you're in the right place. You may have a deadline in the office tomorrow, you may have some stressful thing to do, but this session with me, I believe, will be worth your time, especially the first 55 minutes. So let's move on. I want to call myself a pilot. I just like the analogy because of how planes take off, and how you just have to trust that the next 55 minutes of this session will be worth it. So I want you to understand that I have had 15 years experience managing survey data in the World Bank projects, DFID projects, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation projects, UNICEF, Malaria Consortium, and again, just to name a few. I've worked in the last 15 years across all these kinds of projects. I've worked when it was paper. I also have had experience using certain key strategic software for collecting data. I started with things like Microsoft Access when it was still paper-based. And that was my concept then, very novel concept that these are databases, so why don't we create software that our applications then. But a lot has happened since the year 2004/2005 when I started working on survey data. So there's CS Pro, there's Survey Solutions, ODK, whether it's the paid or the free or the Concare. These are the ones I have always used in the last 15 years, and I have experience using them. I have also try to use R and Stata for managing the data that comes from this data collection software or creation software. So I use that extensively. And I'm very passionate about geographical data too, QGIS and ArcGIS. So I have experience using all this software, and I hope that you can trust me that I know and I can relate to some of the things you may have gone through when it comes to managing large surveys or working with this software and all the issues that come with them. So it's very important that we dig into this quickly. And I always want to start with having an understanding. We know we mentioned asking the right questions. Why are you engaged as a data professional, or why are data professionals usually engaged? And the why is important because the man who knows how will always get the job, but the one who knows why will always be his boss. And I know that there are some people here managing data people. It's very important to understand the why and then help them to focus if you are a field manager listening to this. But if you're a data manager listening to this or data professional listening to this, it's very important that you understand why, what's the why behind every project. So I have another favorite quote from one of my authors, Stephen Covey. He says, begin with the end in mind. Every project has an end, and it seems to have a generic end most of the time in most of the projects. And look back, the main objective is to produce high quality data sets within a defined time limit. So you can have high quality data sets, but if it's not within the defined time limit, you failed. If you've had it, if you had low quality data sets but within the defined time, you still failed. These two conditions must be met, and that's what I have seen across every project I have done in the last 15 years, and I hope you can relate with that. And when we mention high quality, it's very important to understand and define that high quality means it is complete, not that we went to 250 households and what we have in our data is 100. There's failure there. The data that is of high quality has a sense of completeness, and I don't mean everything must be in the data set, but everything must be accounted for. Every man must know what happened to every single data set. And we'll talk about this in other engagements or other fora. And then it must be concise, not having too many details that are not necessary, that are distracting the very essence, the very data that is required for analysis. And then it must be consistent, and this is where I talk about logic. You cannot have a 5 months pregnant man. No man is ever pregnant, talkless of being 5 months pregnant. And you can't have a 5-year-old pregnant woman too. All that is because there is some problem with the logic somewhere. So that data set that you are submitting to the client or to your supervisor must be logically consistent. And then the fourth one and last one is about the clarity. If your data set that you're handing over you have to ask so many questions, you don't know what this variable means, you don't know what this is standing for, and there is no clarity in handing over those data sets, then you have also failed. So these 4 conditions must be met for us to say that you have had a high quality data set. We don't have time to explain why that's important, but I need to emphasize one more thing, that to produce this data set, there must have been some data collection program. I am very aware that you are here because we have transited from paper-based surveys to electronic data collection. So that means some programming was done, and that also would lead to this high quality data set. So let's dive into the first question. The first question is, what do I know about this project? Now, every survey data collection project has some information, and when I started as a naive guy, I used to just flaunt that, just give me the program questionnaire to program and program it for you. But later on I realized that if I did not understand the project, there will be problem. So it's very important, and I use this get into the character phrase a lot, because if you have related with those who are in acting, Nollywood or Hollywood or Bollywood or whatever wood, you would realize that getting into character means trying to study the role you are going to play in the acting role that you have to do. And you'll see some people, because they want to get into character. I know there was a guy who was doing Nelson Mandela's movie, and he had to travel to South Africa, watch a lot of his movies, a lot of his speeches, try to get his intonation, his accent, and he did well. I think that was Piers Morgan or somebody, or Morgan Freeman. He did the role very well because he spent a lot of hours studying all the content. So it's very important, and it's because there's a concept mentioned called the ownership. You own the project. See yourself as the owner and the one who visioned it out. And for you to get to that point, you have to immerse yourself in the project and have an understanding. This is one fundamental mistake I made in my career when I was starting out, and it led to a lot of issues. So it's very important because that's when you get the big picture. And this big picture helps you when you are dealing with the granular details. We'll soon get there and you'll get clear. So it's very important to know the what of the project, the background and context of the project. What's the project all about? And then the why of the project. What are the objectives of the study? What are they trying to do? Because when you are on the team and you do that, you get to understand a lot. And then it's very important to know the how of the project, the protocols, because it helps you and influences you when you are programming or designing the data strategy for the project. So these are documentations that you need to request for, you need to find, you need to read. Don't just keep them somewhere, and try and do that before the project starts. All these 18 questions are proactive questions. So try and do that before they start. There are other questions about the project that may be very important. Clear deliverables. Sometimes, I mentioned data sets. Some want data sets. Some want you to tabulate the data sets for them. So these are all the requests that you must be very clear about. And there could be other deliverables, but I'm just speaking from a data perspective. So let it be very clear what you are supposed to do at the end. Sometimes it isn't, but as soon as you can get to that point, make sure you get clear deliverables. And then one thing I need to say just before I move on is we need to finally use a panel study. That's very important because it changes the dynamics of everything. If there's a baseline, midline, and endline, that means there is something called the prefill concept. Some are against it and some are for it, but for any reason, there will be a connection between the baseline and the midline and the midline and the endline. Sometimes it is across 4 quarters. It could be across 6 cycles, so there may not even be a baseline, midline, endline. There could just be so many cycles. Maybe every 3 months you collect data, and it's all on the same people for the same purposes. So please, it's very important that if you are coming at the midline or the endline, that you ask for the baseline data, for example. So these things are very important. Read through and try to understand. Look for this like a detective. And this question is the fundamental question that you need to address quickly. So the second one is, what are the units of observation? When you have found the questions and we have dealt with the first question, you now need to find out what are the units of observations. Now that is one question I never really knew when I started out, especially in the electronic world, of understanding the unit of observation. So it means the central focus of every questionnaire or instrument. Who is it addressing? Who or what is the central focus of each instrument? So for example, we want to ask our elderly citizens questions about their retirement benefits. So we want to ask them about their years of service, their occupation, state of origin, age, or health challenges. So in this case, the unit of observation are the elderly. That means every single row of data is addressing one elderly person. So that's how you see it. So in the row, you'll see the year of service for row 1, row 2, row 3. So each row is addressing one elderly person. It's very important to know that. And why is that important? Because it's very strategic that you must have what we call the unique identifiers and the rosters to be generated. Because there are rosters, and rosters are like sub-observations. That means a man has 3 wives, and each of the 3 wives have 3 children. So man relating with the woman is a sub. That means these 3 women are married to one man. So you can observe the women on that level, or you observe the man at a general level, because the other man who is his neighbor has 2 wives, and maybe those 2 wives have 2 children each. But the point trying to make is that when there are rosters to be generated, you have to be 2 times more careful how you manage them. Otherwise, you get into trouble. I don't know if anybody can relate who is listening to me. And then the number of data sets to be generated is determined by the unit of observation. If you have a man questionnaire, a woman questionnaire, and an adolescent questionnaire, that will be 3 data sets. Although, if they have sub units of observation, they will now be multiple. And this helps us with the relationship and connections. And what I'm trying to say here is, how do you connect the man to the woman and the woman to the children? Because you can say, oh, which of these children belong to this man? And the only way to connect them now is through the woman. Because if you said the man has 3 wives and each of the 3 wives have 3 children each, there should be a way to connect. And those IDs I mentioned, unique identifiers, they are very critical when it comes to that. Now, why is the unit of observation very important? It's because of the unit of analysis. So, what's the unit of analysis? It's how do we group those units of observations. And we go back to this, our elderly people again. We could group them along lines of ethnicity. How many of these elderly people are Yoruba who are healthy, or Yoruba who are not healthy? Like a cross tabulation. So we are grouping them on the lines of health, or on the lines of ethnicity, on the lines of state of origin, on the lines of occupation. So that is very important. And you would see later where our unit of analysis, when we are managing data, is according to the interviewer type, because we are interested in what each interviewer is doing with the data for high quality control or quality assurance. It's very important that you know what each interviewer is doing with the data. So why is it important? Without this unit of analysis variable, you have wasted a lot of time. Trust me. I remember a particular project where it was missing. Now, don't ask me how, but it was missing, and then data had been collected, and we had to go back to collect that. I think it cost the organization at that time about ₦1 million then. So it's important that you check that those units of analysis variables are there. It's already a very big crime for one variable to be missing, because I mentioned completeness. But when the unit of analysis variable is missing, that is 2 times more trouble. So that the client too, when we do the dummy data, which I will explain later, the client can use that variable to check that everything is in place. So what is the sampling frame? Because it's important to have that sampling frame. Where are we doing? There are different kinds of methodologies, we call them cluster sampling, but it's very important that you have what we call the sampling frame. And this sampling frame is necessary because most of the time we are calling it a survey data, so we are not doing a census, we're not interviewing everybody most of the time, so you're likely going to need one because there's some kind of selection coming from those units of observations. That means if we had 5,000 elderly people, you are taking 500 or 600 of them, then you have a sampling frame of 5,000. It's very important that you have that in a list or on some kind of structure. It's usually a data set. For example, in household survey, the sampling frame, I'm trying to simplify it, it's more complex than that. It's really a clustered sampling. The sampling frame is the listing data of the household. So it's very important that you have those things close by. And they're important because they help us to check completeness. Now, if I extracted 600 people out of 5,000 people within a community, and someone went outside that community by mistake, my data should show that this person is not within the selection that we need. So that's important. So to help check completeness, and we'll talk about this in detail in all my future classes. So there is one called the computing of weights, and that's very important too, because if you know the whole, it can help you compute the weights and then make a meaningful sense of the data. So how should data be delivered is another critical question. Remember I said in question number 0, begin with the end in mind. Begin with the end in mind. So you start planning and structuring. It minimizes your stress if you know how these data sets are delivered. There's the wide format, there's the long format, and there's one I call the combined format. And this is just basically long format that has been merged with all sub categories of data or subunits. So you have merged the man with the woman, and then you have merged the woman with the children. So in the data set, in one data set, I can see all the men information, all the woman information, and all the children information in one single data set. Now it's not as easy as this, and like I said, in my courses, future courses, I will explain this in greater detail. But this is very important so that you already have some automation in place to know how it's supposed to be done. Now, these formats depend basically on the strategy for the project. If you are fortunate to be the data manager and the data analyst, so you choose what you want to use. But it's assumed that the data analyst knows how this is structured and how it affects his analysis. So sometimes it's the preference of the analyst that determines how this will be structured. But it's a good question to ask before you start the project. So this is another one of concern, capturing media files. We have pictures, we have audio, we have videos, and we have other formats of media files. That's all the non-string numeric data that is being collected now during field work. And now it's very important because they take a lot of internet bandwidth. You understand? A picture is large, an audio too is large, and a video is larger, taking space and taking bandwidth. So we need that because the data capture devices must have enough space to take them. If I'm going to 10,000 households or 200 households per interview, I want to be sure there's enough space to take the quality of videos you are putting. And then the server too. If I'm going to 10,000 households and each video file is 5 megabytes, that's about 50,000 megabytes. And then you convert that to gigabytes, and then you have to ask yourself if your server has space for that. Please, this can cause a lot of stress if you are handling media files. So important that you check that you have proper media files. And then there has to be a clear tested strategy, and I use the word tested deliberately to ensure that the files that you generate are labeled. Let's say we are doing videos for every elderly person that we have interviewed, and we miss the videos or we mix them up, then we'll have a problem bringing them together, and there may be a problem making sense of the data, especially from the data perspective and project objective perspective. So it's very important that you have a strategy to match these media files, otherwise there will be a problem. This also causes stress in one survey, and I'm sure you are learning from my own mistakes, because if I asked all these questions, it will have helped me a great deal. So what applications are we using? This is where there has always been a battle, and I always think sincerely from my own perspective, let's just be as objective as possible in dealing with this. And people have their loyal software they use, and I said I'm happy to date, but I just don't double date. If I'm on CS Pro, I'm with CS Pro for something. If I'm with ODK, I'm with ODK for something. So all these popular software, the CS Pro, the ODK, the Survey Solutions, the CompCare, there are factors we need to consider before we choose which one. The turnover time, how long are you asked to program a certain tool? And this may be because of the collaboration. There are some software that are more collaborative than others. For example, CS Pro is not as collaborative as Survey Solutions or as ODK. And then you need to look at offline access. If you are in a place where you have to program the data collection tool and you don't have internet, some of this software do not function optimally outside of places where there are no there is no internet. So CS Pro is the one I think is the most viable for offline access. You can literally program the entire program, and you don't have internet, and you can plug it into devices manually using an OTG USB cord. So this is very interesting. So let's assume there's no internet at all, and I had to do an interview with 5 people. I can program everything I need to program, put it on their tablets, and they can use it straight away. But this is difficult in places like ODK and survey solutions. But extraction too, they have offline for ODK. So I don't want to spend so much time here, but it's very important to know about offline access. Then the integration with third-party apps. We did some survey where the phone had to vibrate. We did some survey where you had to dial a number. So you need to look at which competencies they have. So, and in the course I will teach and train, I will try and show you which ones are good for what purposes. None of them is bad, but the context matters a lot. And then the data export sequence, because you are trying to minimize your stress of how you export the data in the shortest possible time. So it's important. And then metadata generated, because we have information about where they went to. So the solution has a greater some programming that helps you to see if someone answered a question 3 times, change the question. Some very, very interesting information that helps to monitor what is being done. So they're varied, and each of them have varied capacity on these levels, but we just have to choose. And finally, I think the client is the one who may make that preference. If he says this is what we use or we have been using, then that is why it's very important that data programmers have vast understanding of all the tools that are needed. So, question number 8, what type of devices are we using? Very important, because there are the phones on one side and the tablets on the other side. And the reason is for visibility issues. Sometimes you have to put a group of questions on your screen. Sometimes you have to look at a roster on your screen, and visibility is the strategy. So if you're having phones, you may want to slash or review the way you lump variables together, because visibility is key. If the enumerators cannot see your questions, then you are creating more problems than solving. So technical specs, very important that you do that, because the devices should come with screen sizes. I've explained that in detail when I was talking about the tablets and the phones. And then the storage, we mentioned media files. If you are doing a lot of media work, you want to be sure that you can store pictures, audios or videos or any other form of information on that device. Then the RAM size, this is what allows each of these programs function, and the other relevant installed apps. So you need to look at other apps, especially if you are looking at third-party apps. I said one allows the phone to vibrate, so you have to create a vibrating app, for example. So these are the things, and not every phone can take it. Some are Android, iOS, so all those things are very important that we consider before we start working on data. So the servers are important too, because that's where everything will be ultimately stored. And we started that conversation about servers when we were talking about how big the media files can be. So there are very important things that you need to consider. And this is where, I mentioned that budgets can be a source of stress. So there are free options of servers and there are paid options. And each of them come with its pros and cons. I mentioned ODK, the paid and the free. There's survey CTO, and there are servers like Kobo. So they come with their own pros and cons and challenges. And then sometimes the client wants to use his own server and not your own server. You may be freelance. The client says, this is our servers and this is where we want you to work. It's very important to know that ahead of time. For example, if you're working with a client server, you don't want to be messing up with their files. You don't want to stick strictly to business and then move ahead. So security and capacity. We've mentioned a bit about capacity in the previous slide. We want to be sure it can store as much. We have people who have been in the middle of survey and and the server was full and people could not submit that information, that can be a big problem. And then people now start losing data or misplacing tablets. So you want to be sure before you launch into something there's enough space for that. And security, we have literally sworn an oath, gone to the ethics committee to ensure that the data remains secure. We don't want people tampering with information that we have promised to keep private. So these are the things you do when you consider servers. You understand, so that you make sure that you are doing the right thing in the right way under the right conditions. So number 10, what's your variable naming strategy? In my 15 years of experience, I have seen two basic types. The one that has question number and a prefix, it's something like this: question 101, question 102, question 103. So we have that kind. So, and they have their advantages. The other one is the one I call the long descriptive strings, and these long ones are things you have to be cautious about, because when you export them to software like Stata takes only 32 characters. So when people are programming, they write 42 characters and Stata will truncate it. So there are pros and cons. They look like this: pupil underscore name, pupil underscore age, pupil underscore gender. Now they could mean the same thing, but people have their arguments for or against. And when I take the other courses or modules in the future, I'm going to explain what I think about both and why you should use one over the other and in what context. But this is very important, and this puts people into trouble. Now people also get into trouble when they try to mix them up. So it makes it difficult to read. It makes it difficult for you to extract information, because we talked about clarity of data when we're talking about high quality data sets. So this also is the option value strategy, and just a follow through. We have single select and multiple select questions. Now the question is not about what we see outside. If you have programmed these tools before and you have seen paper questionnaires, you must have seen things like this: yes is equal to 1, no is equal to 0. So where you pick 1, and that means yes. But in programming too, you can literally put a small case letter S, yes, or YES, meaning you choose the option yes. So the behind the scene values can be string or numbers, and they come with challenges. I naturally would not advise you to mix them up, but if you do, understand the context and the reason why you do. This creates a lot of stress, and trust me, the day I break these things down, you will realize why it's causing a lot of problems. So I would advise you, when you're sticking and you're a junior programmer, I suggest you stick to one. If you're taking the numbers, take the numbers, and if you're taking the strings, take the strings. And I still want to put that in or throw that in. I think you should take the numbers, but people have their reasons why they still take the strings anyways, and we will discuss that in a deeper sense in the days to come. But it's very important that if you're going to reduce your stress, you need to look at that option value strategy. And then we have the non-response code strategy. This is very important. We have the don't knows, the not applicables, other specify, or none of the above, or their likes. Why is it important? Because there is a need for consistency. You will save yourself many hours of work if your don't know is 96 throughout the questionnaire. Just use 96 as an example. So some prefer to stick to the DHS standards. That's fine. But whatever standard you are sticking to, be consistent. It will save you a lot of stress. Trust me, when you are checking your data, when you're trying to look at your data, it will save you a lot of stress. And you'll be able to do more with less when you're consistent. Then the dynamics change when you're using them with integers. There are select option questions where you select one or select multiple, or integers. If you say, for example, what is your age? And if you don't know your age, like we have in certain places, maybe because of dementia or because of old age, and you say, oh, let's put 99 as a non-response code for an old age. Now the danger with that is that if there's someone who is actually 99 years old, there will be a problem. And that's why we naturally recommend using a negative sign to code non-response codes. But we will talk about all these non-response codes in detail in the course I'm going to share with you at the end of this session. So question number 13, what is the dummy data generation strategy? It's very important to begin with the end in mind. What if you could do what we call a dress rehearsal? You know, they do that for weddings. What would the wedding look like? So they do that also for plays. They do a dress rehearsal the day before the main play. People come out, dress everything, and make sure they can give feedback. Now the whole idea of that dress rehearsal is a feedback, and that's the same thing with this dummy data generation. What if we had completed the survey and submitted the data set? As we have submitted it to the data analyst, can he look at it and tell us what he thinks? So the sources of this dummy data generation can be DEX testing. Someone sits down and enters a lot of data, and then we see where the gaps are. Another way is the pilot, where you actually go to do a real life out of office experience. So that's a source of dummy data, and depending on your budget, your plan, your strategy, you can use the DEX testing, you can use the pilot, or you can use both. So it's important, and there are arguments for and against all this. Some prefer pilot, some prefer DEX testing, some prefer both, and then we will discuss this in detail in the course I'm going to share with you. So you may need to also outsource. This is very important. When you are generating dummy data, this is the challenge I had, and it caused a lot of stress in my career. I will be programming and I will be expected to test. So it's good to test the flow for DEX testing, but the problem is, if you really need to see how the whole thing panned out, you have to generate as much data as possible. So I am programming, I am DEX testing. Excuse me. So the challenge with that is that it eats into your programming time. So it's like you cook, put 1 spoon of this thing, and then you have to taste it. I agree. But the point is that if you were cooking and someone was tasting and giving you feedback, you could just be adjusting. So the idea is, you need to ask yourself if you want to program these things yourself, or you want to outsource it. Someone does the DEX testing while you do the programming, or you do both. You do the programming and you do the DEX testing at the same time. So the 14th question is, how do we measure interviewer performance? And this is key. In every system, especially data management system, there's a human element, and that it's going to affect the mix. And when we mention humanity, it's critical to the success. We could have the best planes, best programs, best servers, best tablets. If the people who are going to run this thing are dishonest, incompetent, you're going to fall into a lot of trouble. So it's critical to get the right people manning these devices that you have spent so much time. All those 13 questions we've asked, variable naming strategies, we mentioned all kinds of stuff in the last few minutes. They will be useless if the humans who are involved are not monitored. And you have heard that phrase, to err is human, and that's very correct. Human error. But there are 2 kinds of errors that I have observed. We hear this in accounting, but we can apply them here, and I have my conceptual or definitions of this. We have the error of omission and the error of commission. The error of omission is something you did not know, you accidentally did. But error of commission is what I consider something you did deliberately, with intent. You understand? And now this thing mixes up exactly on the field sometimes. Sometimes the guy started with omission and it worked, and he got a discovery and it became commission. So, but let's look at what happens and what may happen on the field, and why we must always try and measure their performance. What happens if an enroller was interviewing a 30-year-old? If you were interviewing a 30-year-old woman, and you were supposed to take her age, and then you added 1 extra 0, that can change a lot of things. An extra 0 makes that thing 10 times the value it was. So, and that changes the dynamics of everything. And an innocent 0 is causing you endless nights of sleep, sleepless nights, endless sleepless nights, where you're just finding out what happened. and you don't understand that it was an error that someone made. So it's something that you have to have in your strategy, how you are going to do that. So sometimes it's difficult to know whether I was deliberate or not, and really I wouldn't bother about whether I was deliberate or not. The most important thing is finding out these errors and trying to communicate them. So they could be logical, they could be geographical, or they could be time-based. So it's very important to know the common type of errors that are likely going to be generated from the data set. As you look at the questions, you will get a sense of that. But the most important thing is the feedback strategy in that thing. When you measure the performance, you need to get back to them, and you need to see that things are reducing. You understand? So this is one critical question that you need to ask if you are going to save yourself a lot of stress. What's this translation strategy? Question number 15. This, if not managed properly, can just make the whole thing so long. And the reason is because we are managing many edits at the same time. People are correcting things, giving feedback, so you're correcting the English part, and then someone has to be making sure that the Kigali, the Hausa part, the Swahili parts, all those language parts are aligned. So, and this refers back to the choice of software too, because some softwares are better than some others. And then there's something about outsourcing and programming also, where you decide to collect the translation yourself and do it, or you give them a template where they enter in the translation and do it. So there are techniques about this, and in my course I teach them greatly across all the data collection tools. So collaboration strategy, I'm sure you have seen that data management is not a one-man thing, and we must work as teams, work in teams and work as teams, because that is the only way we can manage certain things. Questionnaires are getting more complex, more massive in size, and we are asked to be more creative, so we have to try and work in teams. It's always best to build a team, and you may start with a team of 2. So you need to ask yourself whether you want to run shifts. What it means is that I program to a certain place, I stop, you take over and program. I know that has happened before, where I program from 8 till like say 4, and someone takes over from me from 4 and moves on till 10, so I can sleep, rest a while, and take over from him. That has its challenges, but that's a method. Another one is simultaneous, and we have softwares that help us now, like Google Sheets, where you can program ODK at the same time. Someone can program the choices while the other person is programming the survey parts. So direction is key, and you don't confuse your team. We mentioned that team strategy just a few minutes ago. You don't confuse your team. A good friend of mine said, in life, direction is more important than speed. So give your team a sense of direction, because that can now become a problem if everybody is going in scattered directions. So your collaboration strategy is very, very key. Now, question number 17, what's your communication strategy? Communication can be so stressful, and for me, the challenge is, I have found from experience, so you can call this my communication weakness ahead of time. I found it very difficult to be reporting about how I quench the fire while I'm quenching the fire. And sometimes stakeholders need feedback. So it's like the governor calling someone, the head of fire service, why is this building burning? And the guy is trying to deploy his guys to the field to quench the fire. He is even on the site himself, trying to see what he can do to the fire. So that's a challenge. So the pre-engagement, and what I mean by that is that before we start, what kind of communication strategy should we have? So we need to identify the stakeholders who needs to be updated, who needs to know, we have finished 20% of the survey, 10% of the survey today. We need to identify them and identify their communication styles. Some prefer this face-to-face video calls, or face-to-face, come in the evening, sit down on my table and tell me what you have done. Some are just strictly formal, send me a mail. Some are visual, they like to see a chart. They want to see everything you have done versus what you have not done. And that's why you have to do some kind of unique blend that seems to address all the styles somehow. And then there are communication frequencies. Some want a daily report, some want it weekly, some want it every Wednesdays, some want it every Fridays. Then the communication channels, some want it via WhatsApp, some want it on phone. I had somebody who he loved feedback on phone. He provided feedback on phone and he expected it on phone too. He didn't so much like emails, and even if you sent him a mail, he would still call you. So some prefer email. So you need to understand all this when you are managing them during the engagement period. Now, post engagement period, you may be likely requested to write what we call a data management report. And I want to advise you, you may want to do like I did. I was writing voice notes of the things I observed. So when it was time to write a report, all the ideas were there already. Some also have their team members writing their own snippets of report, and they integrate it into one central report. So the key is to also be very proactive. So these are 17. Let's go on to the very last question that I think that are important. So you need to identify your communication weakness. I had mentioned that briefly. So what can go wrong is the 18th question. And why we ask this question, those who have known me in the last 15 years closely know that I always ask this question. After asking every question, I ask this question just to find out if there are still more questions unanswered. So the first thing I want to let you know, these are not the whole 18 questions that you need, but this 18th question helps you to ask more questions. Because when you know what can go wrong, you can probe deeper. And like Albert Einstein said, he said he would spend 55 minutes thinking of the right questions to answer. So why do we ask this what can go wrong? Remember our mandate to produce high quality data sets within a defined time limit. What can stop us from keeping to time? What can stop us from getting high quality data set? We've defined what it is. What can stop the data set from being complete, from being concise, from being consistent, and from being clear? This is the question of the mother of all the questions that you need to ask yourself. Because when you do that, it helps you. We've also mentioned the programming language. What can go wrong with CS Pro? What can go wrong with Survey CTO? What can go wrong with ODK? What can go wrong with CompCare? Things do go wrong, but it's going to be important that you ask yourself these questions. For one reason first, no two projects are alike, but they have core similarities. You remember, we said all of them, for example, must produce high quality data sets within a predetermined time. So no two projects are alike, but they have core similarities. So if you can know what went wrong here, it may likely go wrong in another one. So it's important. And this question must be daily. Throughout the life of this project, you must keep on asking yourself, you're as good as your last joke. And that I heard from Bovie, a popular comedian in my country. You say, oh, everything was okay yesterday, we made it through yesterday. Today is a new day. As the data sets are coming in, you may now begin to see a pattern that you did not see on the 6th day, on the 7th day. That's why you must ask the questions as you look at the data sets every day while you're managing the systems. Now, the question is not intended to make you paranoid. They say, what can go wrong? No. But rather prepared and alert, rather proactive. We said 18 proactive questions you ask. And that's very important because that is what will help us minimize as many errors as possible. And this is always learned over time. But asking this question, it will save you a lot of time, energy, and stress. I do that a lot. It's a practice, and I've grown to use it quite a number of times, so I can nip some problems in the bud. So this question, if you ask them very well in conjunction with the first 17 questions, it may land you a promotion. People may be very happy with you, land you a repeat job, a client is satisfied because you are taking charge. Now, this what can go wrong is what has led to the first 17 questions. in the last 15 years. So I've gone through and looked at what went wrong, and these are the reasons why I now start asking these questions. That is what is behind everything I have done. So I'm hoping that these 18 questions have been helpful to you. I'm hoping that they now help you to see where you may have made some mistakes and what you can do. So it's very, very clear this is the beginning of another journey, because there are so many things I mentioned in these 18 questions that I did not do justice to. And honestly and sincerely, if you would ask me, I cannot do that within 1 hour. I cannot squeeze 15 years of my life into 1 hour. But I've tried to squeeze it into 14 weeks. So I have a comprehensive 14-week course. And each time I'm tempted to make it 15, but I just want to keep it at 14. 14 weeks on survey data management, which you will benefit immensely from. You will benefit from my mistakes. You will benefit from my experience. And you don't need to make the mistakes I made. So I am doing everything to capture the theoretical and practical aspects of data management. Many people understand the theory, and I usually use that word when I'm talking to some of my mentees. You have not seen blood. You have not been to war. And it has a popular line in Mel Gibson's movie The Patriot, where he tries to discourage his community from going to war. You have not seen blood, and that's the real thing. Many people just understand the theory and they go and they get wounded. So when I mention theory and practical, I mean there's a difference between I know how to drive a car and I know how to drive a car in Lagos. So you may know the theories, you may know these are the right things, but how do you do it in the context and the realities of the stress and the pressures that happen on the field? That is what I want to teach. I want to teach it in the context of the realities, not from just theoretical perspectives, but from deep practical aspects. So, why should you subscribe for this course? Why should you subscribe for this course? The first reason, you've seen my profile, you've seen what I've been able to do in 15 years, and across the softwares you may have not seen. All these probably are claims too, so maybe I'm just fake. But the reason I'm saying this is because this is what I have achieved. And there are people who can attest to that this person has been able to achieve all this. So I don't want to speak so much of myself. Second reason is that I have a unique approach to training, and this is what I call the simple complex approach. I simplify those complex data terminologies. I hope I have done that in this session. Simplify it, but now I give you a tough problem to solve, because I believe if you can simplify tough concepts, you can apply the simplified concepts to solving tough problems. I hope I did not lose you there. So the goal is to make sure that it's as simple as a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old can understand. But now I now give you a brain damaging problem that helps you to think in a deep way. I create a problem based on my experience that helps you to think in a deep way, and that gives you what we call self-confidence. In my years of teaching maths, that's what I did. I would break down the concept and I'll give a very tough maths question. And I used to hope, and it worked most of the time, that when you understood the simple concept, you could translate it into solving any problem in the world. So I believe that every problem, when it's broken into simple pieces, it can be solved. So that is one unique way I have approached training. Simple concept, tough thinking. Another thing I want you to understand and why you must invest: knowledge is an investment. Those who are close to me know I don't joke with knowledge. There was a time in my years in university, half of my pocket money went to books, I don't even worry about food, went to acquire knowledge, internet time, buying books. I was always investing in knowledge. So I dare to say, for every dollar that you invest in this, you get 5 back. So you be the judge. You've listened to this 18 questions. For the 1 hour you have spent here, if you have listened to them and you have really grasped them, it will save you several hours now. I dare to say I have saved you 5 hours of your time. maybe for the rest of the year, because you listen to this 1 hour. And I can tell you the same thing. It's an investment. You will get your money back in terms of sleep, in terms of physical cash, but in terms of less stress, in terms of more productivity, there is definitely going to be a return on investment if you follow the course as instructed. Because I have my rules, so it's very, very clear. But there is an ROI here, and it's massive. The course is online. That's another reason. So I understand your schedule is tight, and that's why I had to plead for at least 1 hour of your time. So you can go to the internet, watch the course anywhere in the world, log in. But the only thing we do, you have to watch each module within the week. Now it's massive, so you could push Monday out, Monday evenings or Sunday afternoons or Saturday nights or Friday nights to watch. But you have about 4 to 5 hours of watching every week, and you can stagger it if you so desire. But the bottom line of it is that you need to watch it. You don't need to come to a physical classroom, because we all know how our schedules managing surveys can be. So after this course, you will get these following benefits. There's one more reason why you must subscribe to this course. First thing is that from the knowledge you have gained, I can assure you the time you will spend to manage your data will significantly reduce. It will reduce. So if you spend 4 hours, probably you will be spending 3, 2, or even 1 hour. There are some things I'll just collapse and you will see them, that you don't need to spend that long checking for information. Secondly, the data quality will significantly improve. If people have been complaining, no, your data is terrible, you don't do a good job, why are we seeing pregnant women or pregnant men in your data? Pardon me. So they won't find such things. The quality will just shoot up. You understand? And in a shorter time. So I would also give you access and tools to templates to making your work better and faster. Over the last 15 years, I have built certain structures and systems, and I will show them in the next couple of days, that help to shorten your work. You've wasted time, I can assure you, and I'm going to prove it to you. You've wasted time doing things you don't have any business doing, and have been modified for you. I will give you tools and templates that will make your work faster and better, and I'm going to show you how you can just use these tools to break down complex steps. Steps that are 50 steps, break it down to 2 steps, and you have still achieved those who are using 100 or 50 steps. Then the fourth thing I'm going to do, and this is the final promise I make, I'm giving a 1-month one-on-one support where I'll help you go through your data management cycle, walk you through. But this is for the first 20 people who register. I will be going beyond my monthly limit. If I go beyond 20, I can only manage the first 20 cases. So it's a first come, first serve basis. You cannot just push yourself into this. So why should you also subscribe for the courses? I want you to see other people who had experienced my training and what they had to say from across the world. There is Zara Durrani, who is in Pakistan. We worked together on a project in Sierra Leone together, and she said she has this to say. I have a video to prove this, but I've taken so much of your time. I'll just take a clip of what she said. We had quite an interactive session. I hope you get to experience it. Joshua is my mentee, and we worked closely together in my previous place of work. He has this to say about my training. He said in his training, you will learn how to learn. And this is the secret of my career success. Andreas is in Spain. This is what he has to say about my training. He engaged large teams of enumerators and was explaining technical issues while keeping an amazing sense of humor. Now I must put a caveat here. It's quite difficult doing that on an online course. But maybe, I'll be able to make you smile while you're learning. I have this principle of laugh and learn. So just make the whole thing not too difficult or too complex for you. This was his perception. All these videos I have, and I'm happy to share them in the next couple of days with you. Then Shafiq Arif, who is a very elderly senior colleague of mine. I really thank him for all the feedback he's giving. He said, I observed him delivering a training for about 10 people in Sierra Leone. I love this training, and you will also love his training if you get a chance to. So these are people who had experienced me training. There are other reports, but there's no time for that. These are the things you are going to benefit. So, what are you waiting for? Click the link below and get more information. You would also get a number on your screen so that you can send a WhatsApp message if you need to get in touch with us. If you don't see the WhatsApp message, look for the link. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope it is worth the investment. I will see you in class shortly.